Thanks for joining us today on our Tridion Sites 10 Bootcamp. I'm going to talk a little bit about the platform upgrades that will be introduced on Tridion Sites 10. I then want to talk a little bit about OpenSearch and how we're using that. And we'll see a little bit more about that in our semantic AI piece as well. And then finally, I want to just touch on some of the platform support pieces and some of the deprecations as well that we've had in this new release. So first up, Tridion Sites 10 has now moved on to sort of a more formal long-term support, which is in line with the AWS long-term support policy. In practice, this means that instead of the 2-year standard support cycles, we have a 3-year standard support for the LTS releases with extended support on top of that. So you can see from this diagram, when Tridion Sites 10 comes out, it overlaps a little bit with Tridion Sites 9.6 in terms of full support. And then from an upgrade perspective, you can see that we're still supporting the 9.1, 9.5, and 9.6 upgrade pieces. So on that point, we still support the same upgrade paths as we did before. So we can do the all at once, if you wish, from those supported releases. And also the staged, or what we sometimes call CM first. So you can upgrade your CM components first and then handle the delivery component later on. And alongside that, we also do the rolling upgrade as well from the most recent release, which is Sites 9.6, which allows you to upgrade the database independently of the services. So that also helps customers maintaining uptime on their services and where they can upgrade different components piecemeal instead. Just wanted to touch briefly on the security in this release. So as part of our support policy, we do maintain our security standards. So we use Veracode for our security SAST and SCA, which is the Static Application Security Testing and Software Composition Analysis tests. And we have a policy agreed again across the AWS business, and we meet the stage 1 policy on the sites and DXD platforms. And we also perform penetration testing on the endpoints as well. So that gives some confidence that our software is good for those customers, particularly those that like to ensure that their environments are properly secure, particularly the bounce and such like. So moving on to OpenSearch. So I mentioned earlier that that's part of our semantic AI. So in the past, you may know that we were using Elasticsearch to support the content delivery search offering. Unfortunately, they changed their license back in 2021, which made it somewhat complicated in terms of the licensing for some of our customer needs. And it meant that some customers might be in a bit of a grey area if they were launching a website that had large volumes of search capabilities on there. It would have meant that customers would have needed legal departments to determine whether they're in breach of that Elastic license, or whether they would have needed to invest in a Elasticsearch license. So rather than complicate our customers in that task, we made the decision to switch to OpenSearch, which was forked from Elasticsearch 7.10. It's a fully Apache 2 license one. It's has a good communities following to it now. It's backed by AWS. And of course, for our own cloud offering, that's a benefit because it means that we can use their managed service in our own cloud release. OpenSearch itself, being open source, has additional features as well for customers. So, if customers need a search facility and they're looking at using Elastic as well for their own needs, then OpenSearch provides additional security features out the box, which otherwise would have been a paid option. And there's also some quite nice machine learning features that are coming in, which is very interesting in this world of generative AI, where OpenSearch can support some of those needs. In Sites 10, DXD 12, which is the underlying DXD version sitting next to Sites 10, we will be supporting the latest 2 release of OpenSearch. OpenSearch do quite an aggressive release schedule, so every couple of months or so there's a new release. And they are supposedly cross-compatible between them. So we will always test on the latest release available to us at any time at the point of release. And in terms of upgrading, if you want to an existing release, it's relatively straightforward to do the upgrade. You obviously need your existing Elasticsearch cluster. You will need a new OpenSearch cluster. So obviously, if you're an on-premise customer and you have a big Elasticsearch cluster, you need to make sure you have capacity during that upgrade to cater for another OpenSearch cluster for the duration of the upgrade. We then provide a set of PowerShell scripts that you can run against those two endpoints. And we will then take the data from your Elasticsearch and re-index it into a new OpenSearch cluster. And then it's just a case of testing and deploying that out. And then you can decommission your original Elasticsearch cluster. So moving on to platform support. So I'm just going to go through some of the key pieces here. So on this diagram, you can see where there's a tick, it means it's fully supported. Where there's an asterisk, that means it's a deprecated support. And where there's a cross, it means that where there's a cross, it means it's no longer supported. So in this case, we dropped support for SQL Server 2017, Oracle Database 18c, which is actually fallen out of support with Oracle as well. And clearly Elasticsearch 7, we will no longer support in this latest release. You'll see reference in this list to Ignite, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in our platform update. And Redis is here, which is still supported for our CIS service on the CIL side, beg your pardon, where we use Redis for client-side caching. On the operating system list, we've dropped supported again of browsers in this case that are no longer supported by the operating system vendors. Drop support for Windows Server 2016, Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7, and we've deprecated support on Enterprise Linux 8. On the platform support for the virtual machine, we have two interesting things here. .NET Framework 4.8 is on Windows 2022, which is one of the new supported platforms. You need 4.8.1, but that doesn't exist on Windows 2019, so we still support 4.8.0 on that platform. .NET Core 6 we use in our connector framework, but perhaps most pressingly here is our switch from Java 11 to Java 17. So in previous versions of the product, we were actually building against Java 8 still, or Java 1.8. In this version of DXD, we're now only building against JDK 17, which is an LTS release of Java. So if you have a customer that relies upon CIL libraries, for instance, you won't be able to use those libraries unless you switch to Java 17 on your CIL side. Now, clearly, if you still want to use the previous versions of the CIL against our DXD 12 services, that will still work because our CIL has always been backwards and forward compatible, broadly speaking. So for those customers, particularly maybe on the current version of DXA, for instance, which is built against Java 1.8, they can continue to use those libraries that come with and are referenced by DXA, and they will still work against DXD 12. But if you're building something new and still wish to use those new DXD 12 CIL libraries, you will need Java 17, and that's either using the Eclipse Temurin or Oracle's own JDK. And then finally on this section, the application server support. So obviously on CME, it's only supported on iOS 10. And then on the CD side, we generally only wish to support platforms that support Java 17 natively. All the other ones we deprecate. So that might be a challenge for WebSphere and WebLogic, which do not support Java 17 at all at the moment. WebSphere does have a Liberty build that will support it. Similarly for JBoss, there's Update 8, which will support JDK 17. But again, if you're one of those customers that need those platforms and you have some legacy web applications, you can continue to use the early versions of the CIL, and that will work fine. Finally, I want to just talk briefly around the deprecations that we have. So in this release, we've actually dropped some components from the content delivery side and across the broader platform. These have been deprecated for some time, particularly in outbound email case for quite a few releases now. So audience manager and outbound email are no longer available. The cache channel service, that's no longer an option. So you have to use JMS if you wish to use the deployer JMS queue for queuing. monitoring service has been removed because I think there's far better solutions for monitoring our services these days than using that service that we had. And finally, the user-generated service has also been removed in this release. But then across the components themselves, we're deprecating, ADF's already been deprecated for a release, so we continue to support it, but it's not something we develop against. And the CIL libraries have been partially deprecated in previous releases. So clearly the CIL libraries for things like Audience Manager have now disappeared anyway, but we're broadly deprecating across the whole CIL and CIS components of the CD stack on this release tool, because basically we want to encourage customers to be using the new public content API, which is backed by GraphQL. And we're also deprecating the content service and the contextual image delivery service in this release, broadly because those customers that are using it are often finding that these services are provided by other services these days, particularly if you have a CDN, for instance, that will often do your image transformations for you. The context service, a lot of what it can be handled using pure user agent string resolving on the client side these days. So the overhead of maintaining that context service and that extra service tab running, it doesn't make sense to keep it running longer term. The file system storage is still deprecated. That's not something we want to build forward. So clearly, if you have binaries in the file system, we'll continue to support those deprecated components in this release. But again, we would encourage customers to move away from using file system storage for anything other than binaries in this release, for sure. And then finally, on the CM side, we've dropped support for the WebDAV protocol. And then my final slide on this section is around the IQ standalone services. So the IQ services were part of the content delivery stack. These were used to support querying our index services, so Elasticsearch and currently OpenSearch. So in the past, we provided these in 3 formats. We provided a standalone index service, a standalone query service, and we also provided a combined service which had both capabilities. We're no longer shipping those standalone capabilities now, simply because on the deployer side, it needs them both anyway. So we needed that IQ combined service. And on the delivery side, or the customer-facing side, whilst you can still use the CIL to query the IQ query service, which was deprecated previously, again, we would encourage customers to switch to using the much richer content service search API, which I'll be talking about shortly. So you can continue to use IQ combined on the client-facing side if you wish, but again, we would encourage you to move away from that. The new search API still supports the old legacy raw queries as well. So if you've built up some complicated IQ query stuff using the CIL, you can use that directly with our search API just by passing in those raw queries to it. And that's it on this session.